that matter, but I'll take my chances. Oh, are we live now? Cool. Alright. Well, I've got Immutable Destiny and Jade. Jay, have we ever talked before?
No, I don't believe we ever have.
Oh, okay. Well, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Cool. So I'm just checking out your profile here. So you've been watching the CRISPR versus Jungle Jargon, etc. saga unfolding, huh?
Oh yeah, I actually modded a chat between the two of them.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
That one was like a fart in a car.
Yeah, I'm guessing you're kind of on the CRISPR side of things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the fact that CRISPR can actually, back what he's talking about. I gave them both. So I gave them both as part of being moderator, and since it was just the two of them, I gave them both mods.
Mm-hmm.
And in the course of that, like CRISPR was using that mod ability so he could present whatever he wanted to present, back whatever he was saying. Jungle never did anything.
Mm.
He just kept making bald ass claims and bald ass assertions and
Gotcha.
kept on going. So I was just like,
yeah, I chatted with CRISPR for the first time a couple weeks ago, and it was an enjoyable conversation.
yeah, CRISPR's a smart guy.
Just 1 second.
Yeah.
All right. Dead air. Cool.
Yep.
So anyways, yeah, CRISPR's a good guy. I had a good conversation with him. He knows his stuff. But I thought we had some good conversation though. Anyways, so obviously everybody's kind of dealing with everything with Jade. And I had some back and forths with Jade once in a while, like last year. You guys know Jade, right?
Yeah, I know. I've only talked to her. I've been in a couple of hangouts with her, but I think I've only actually talked to her directly in one hangout, and that was just shortly before she passed.
Yeah. What does AFK mean? I'm gonna look that up.
Away from keyboard.
Oh, okay. I should just, Google these things before I ask them while I'm streaming.
Yeah,
live.
I had to Google that a while ago.
Like yesterday.
Hey. What the hell?
Anyways, yeah, I saw it and I was like, Affleck. For some reason, my brain instantly said Affleck. Anyways, yeah, Jade. I liked Jade. And the thing that I really appreciated about her was, one time we were chatting, I guess, in some hangout, and I guess she was being really, I guess, assertive would be the word. I don't even know if that's really the word, but
Jade, be assertive. No,
yeah, I'm looking for a stronger word, but not a negative word. But I think she was kind of lumping me in with a lot of like creationists that she's used to talking to and everything. But I mean, I'd never had anybody do this before. But she sent me a message about like later on that she appreciated the conversation. She's gonna try to approach it differently from now on, because she doesn't want to lump me in with other groups of people anymore.
Yeah,
and I appreciated that. Like, there have been a lot of times where I probably should have gone back and said that to somebody else, maybe even to Jade. um, and I'm just, I never really get around to it, But Jade, she actually got around to that, and that was really cool. I appreciated that, and I've listened to some of the hangouts we were in the past, and I would make a point, and I'm like, yeah, I kind of don't really sound like a very nice person right there. But would I go back to that person? And did I ever go back to Jade and say, I probably should have been a little more polite about that, and whatever. I think we probably, in this online community, we all kind of get a little, from time to time, a little hot-headed and whatever, but...
Oh,
yeah.
I did with jungle jargon.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Couple times.
But, yeah, Jade, she had humility. And, I think we can all learn from that, I think we'll all have better conversations if we can have that kind of humility that she showed. I remembered that, it sticks out in my mind.
Yep, it's about discussing issues, not necessarily lumping people. And like you said, a lot of people make that mistake. You lump everybody in to one group instead of just talking the issues.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to just reset. You get into some kind of a spat or a heated back and forth, and you just have to reset. And sometimes it takes like going to the person and be like, "Hey, let's just start over here, and let's try to have a conversation, figure out a way to talk to each other." And I don't think most people do that. I think a lot of people actually are in this whole thing for the drama. But I think Jade had a strong part of her that was in it for the conversation. A lot of people, I think, are sort of in it for the conversation, but equally for the drama. And I think Jade was genuinely, like, in it for the conversation. And I think you could tell that from the way she researched things. And, I disagreed with many, many things. Probably almost everything with her. But, I can still appreciate, like, she just enjoyed conversation and enjoyed the content of the discussion. Much more so than the drama. She was much more about the content.
Sorry, I was just noticing there was a... there it is. Oh, yeah, it was about to be a pissy match. Got an osprey and a northern harrier.
Oh, okay, cool.
Where I work at, I work in a marshland, so there's osprey and there's a couple northern harriers, and that osprey comes into the area, and that northern harrier doesn't like it too much. And northern harrier and osprey start to,
man,
start to screw with each other.
Yeah. So, anyways, so that's all I have to say about Jade specifically. But one of the things one of the things about Jade was that she was, I don't know what you want to call it, but like a theistic evolutionist might be a term that gets thrown around a lot. But she believes in God. I think she was Catholic.
Yeah.
I think she was kind of devout, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm remembering right.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I can't really say if she was devout or not. I know that.
Okay.
I guess she was Catholic.
But anyways, she was Catholic. She was a theist, and she believed in all of these other things. Like she believed in evolution and abiogenesis, or whatever term you want to use. But she believed a very naturalistic view of how things come about, particularly life. So now I want to kind of move away from Jade specifically, but in honor of her, I also want to talk about that topic a little bit, because I come from a design point of view. And I think I think there's an argument to be made for intelligent design. But from that perspective, it seems strange to me that somebody could say they believe in God and yet reject the arguments to design. Because to me, if you're going to believe in God, now that's kind of a loaded term there, God. You have to define it very well, but let's at least say that it's intelligent or it's conscious. And if you're going to believe that is real, you would have to have some kind of a good argument, and I feel like the intelligent design arguments are the best to support at least the idea that there's some kind of intelligent cause beyond human beings out there somewhere. So to me, I have a hard time understanding that. Like, how can somebody be a devout theist or devout Catholic or devout whatever kind of theistic religion and yet reject the strongest evidences for those conclusions, in my mind?
Well, the thing about evolution, and evolution is not really my wheelhouse. I've talked back and forth about it with a few. Evolution doesn't posit an origin of life. From the little bit of studying that I've done, I was raised as a Christian theist, homeschooled, young Earth creationist. My parents, but later on, my parents were like, "Oh no, the theory of evolution doesn't actually conflict with theistic claims because evolution doesn't posit an origin of life." I mean, it does deal in the idea of the primordial soup. That idea can get tossed around a little bit, but it doesn't posit what that primordial soup has come from or what sparked that.
Yeah.
So could evolution be a system designed by a creator deity? Could be. Could abiogenesis be something that a creator could use to produce life from non-life, or living matter from non-living matter? Because you still haven't gotten to the crux of, and obviously abiogenesis means the theory of evolution are not, they don't go hand in hand. They're both separate. But the origins of, it's the origin of life that becomes the real talking point, and that is something we don't know. So if you have an origin of living things, or let's say just for lack of a better thing, the origin of the atom. If we don't know the origin of the atom, that doesn't necessarily mean that evolution doesn't, or at least what the theory of evolution is trying to do, is the best explanation for it isn't a good explanation. Because it's not a starting point. It's an explanation of what we observe in nature.
Well, a couple of things. I think the line is a little bit fuzzy between evolution and the origin of life, if you want to call that abiogenesis or whatever.
Even that abiogenesis doesn't posit where the matter came from.
Well,
so
sure.
Abiogenesis is trying to figure out whether living matter can come from non-living matter, but it's not positing where the non-living matter first came from, what sparked the non-living matter into existence. It's just trying to figure out, can living matter come from non-living matter? Can life be produced through chemical reactions of non-living matter? Can living matter, or at least the stuff that would be needed to create living things, could that come from it?
Well, I mean, sure. I think, though, we have a definitional problem when it comes to the terms like life, quote unquote, and so that's where it kind of becomes a difficult line to draw, I think. So I think there is some overlap there, but
well, it's not really an overlap. What we have to posit is where did the first stuff come from? The stuff that makes up matter, the stuff that makes up living matter. What is the origin of that?
Well, I would see the question more as where's the evidence? Where does the evidence reside? Does it reside in the evolution of life? Does it reside in the origin of biological life? Does it reside in the origin of the
Well,
physical
like I said, the theory.
constituents?
Well, it's like I said, the theory of evolution hasn't given any evidence to the origin of life.
Right.
What it
Well,
has
that's the other thing.
indicated.
When I say theistic evolutionist, I understand that technically it's pretty a limited term there, but really maybe I should say theistic naturalist, or I don't know if that's the right word, materialist, or um, somebody who believes that God exists, and even believes in a particular theistic religion, yet takes a methodologically takes a materialist view of really everything in the physical world. And so when everything is explainable purely through material processes, unconscious processes, natural processes, however you want to say it, to me, it's a question of parsimony. I mean, if you believe everything can be explained by material processes, then where is your positive inference coming from? As a theist, as somebody who believes in a particular religion, where are you getting that positive inference? And what I hear sometimes is, well, it's a personal belief, it's a personal conclusion, and we should respect that. And fine, I mean, people can believe what they want, but my question is it a rational belief that they hold? And I think, and that's not to say, I don't equate rational with correct or incorrect, with being right or being wrong. I mean, I think you can have rational conclusions about things that are incorrect, but maybe you don't have all of the information or something like that. But I just am trying to figure out on what basis does a theistic evolutionist or a theistic methodological naturalist say that their theistic views are rational if they believe everything that they observe is explainable by material causes. So where is the positive inference coming from? And that's kind of where I have a hard time with theistic evolution.
Well, I mean, as a former theistic evolutionist who didn't really have a problem with believing or accepting the theory of evolution as a Christian theist, it's like I said, is there's
Oh, your audio cut
and
out.
why it. Can you still hear me?
There you are.
Hello. Hello?
Hey, I can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, I had a call come in. The so this is the thing. Is there any reason why we would need a supernatural explanation for what the theory of evolution is trying to explain?
Well, I mean, I guess that's my question for the theistic evolutionist. Um, if you can explain it, if you can explain the history of life or the origin of life in a natural way, then what need is there for God? There is no explanatory need for a God, if you want to call it a God or an intelligent cause or whatever. That's kind of my question. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, hold on. I'm having an audio issue on the phone. So this is for some reason speaker is off. Anyway, well, you could still use a theistic, if you're a Christian theist, you could still use God as an explanation for the creation of all things. So you could say that God was actually, how we have the Big Bang Theory. The Big Bang Theory is the best explanation for, how, for cosmology,
So
at
you're
least parts of it.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
I thought you were done. So what you would say is that we perhaps the theistic evolutionists, for lack of a better term, would just push back the conclusion of God to the origin of the universe and all its fine tuning or whatever. Something essentially, you would say they push it back. That's where the inference can come from.
Well, yeah, because you don't necessarily have a beginning of you're still trying to posit what caused everything to come into being or to come into place. So when we're trying to explain the natural process, when you look at the theory of evolution, you're looking at a natural process. So the theory of evolution, and it isn't an absolute answer. It's a best explanation to how, or for the diversity of life, biological life. Like I said, it doesn't posit that there's a deity. It doesn't posit where or how life came initially into existence. It's just trying to best explain diversity of biological life.
Yeah,
so
sure.
There's no reason why evolution, which is a naturalistic science. We're looking at things in our natural world, how they become diverse, how they evolve over time, how things change biologically, this kind of stuff. That's what we're trying to best explain. The idea of the supernatural being the cause of that is a separate issue. That's a separate thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
I'm not. Yeah. And to be clear, I'm not saying that intelligent design arguments pertaining to the evolution of life or the origin of life are the only arguments that you could have for God or for an intelligent cause that might be something like what we would consider to be God. I'm not saying those are the only arguments, but I kind of think they're the better arguments. Like, I don't really like fine-tuning arguments very much. I kind of understand where they're coming from a little better than I used to, but it's still kind of like the puddle thinks the hole it rests in must have been made for it, just because it fits in there, I mean, if we assume a multiverse, then obviously we live in the universe that can contain us, that can host us, and I just have a hard time understanding how that somehow is the strongest argument when it seems like there are some obvious problems with it. So I think that I'm more persuaded by information arguments, or things where you identify particular effects they look like effects that an intelligent cause produces in our experience. I feel like that's a very straightforward positive inference. If nothing else, it's a positive inference. I'm not sure how you even get to a positive inference from a fine-tuning argument, for example. When you push it back, when you keep pushing the inference back, I don't see how those arguments turn into positive inferences. I think for some other step in the process, like evolution or the origin of life or something like that, it's a lot easier in principle to say, okay, we observe effects that we've seen intelligent cause produce. Well, that's a positive inference. Agree or disagree? It's a positive inference.
Yeah, but you don't. Well, okay, but how did you determine what is the intelligent designer?
How did I determine what the intelligent designer?
How did you determine who the intelligent designer is?
Who? Oh, I'm not saying that I determined that. I think the question of whether it's an intelligent cause or a natural cause is interesting in its own right.
No, yeah, and some would argue that the natural causes are actually examples of an intelligence.
Well, I mean, I think it's just a semantic difference. I don't really think we would be saying different things if we got into the language. I'm comfortable saying that an intelligent cause is natural. I've heard some people define the natural as everything that exists in reality. So, but I mean, just as far as what kind of...
I'm not sure if you could really say something like is intrinsically like intelligent, though, because intelligence seems to be the ability of an organism to survive within its environment, or the readiness of an organism to adapt within its environment. Right? To be able to integrate and to use information in order to further itself.
I'm not really sure. I mean, couldn't a machine be designed to do those things unconsciously?
Well, sure, but what is a machine doing, though? It's taking in information from outside of itself and integrating that and finding patterns. It's finding things that can be manipulated, that can be extracted from the system and used for that thing's benefit.
Sure.
So, I mean, I think intelligence in that sense is the ability of an organism to survive in its, in its environment.
Well, it could be. I mean, I kind of just think of it as self-awareness. If something has a subjective experience, then that's kind of what I mean by intelligent cause.
Well, I mean, in that case, though, it only tells us about the appearance of the mind. It doesn't tell us if something is truly designed.
No, I don't really think that's the case. I mean, you can't mind read. Sure, I agree with that, but we can make inferences from our own direct introspection.
Well, right, except for we're pattern finding creatures. We can only determine design because we design things and because we seek to design things that further our own causes and that purview to our own benefit.
Sure, I don't think there's anything wrong with being pattern seeking.
Well,
I think patterns are informative.
Well, yeah, but the issue is that's also regressive, though, too. We take that to the conclusion of an intelligent designer as well. And we say, oh, well, there must be an intelligent designer. Well, that's because we find things that are to benefit our own self.
Well, maybe. I mean, but you're talking about motive, though, and I don't think that's a very effective way to answer conclusions from a pattern, though.
Aren't things that design motive driven?
They probably are, but that doesn't make any difference to whether or not we are able to infer things from the patterns that we observe. We don't have to know anything about the motive to know that this pattern, to know that a particular pattern is a product of design.
Well, that's kind of the paradigm, though, right? If you don't know if the being intended to create something, and you're saying that, oh, this is the result of something that's intelligent, how do you bridge that gap? Right? If I'm designing a specific structure for a house or a specific structure for a machine, it's because I anticipate for the machine to perform in such a way to maximize some facet of the machine. But that's because there's a motive for that.
Yeah, I mean, clearly definitely there's motive in the designing process.
Yeah, like in the case of creation, it kind of falls back to the puddle in the ground example. It's how do you know that this thing was truly created and not just a product of the environment?
Well, quote-unquote product of the environment, we're talking about material causes versus intelligent causes. So you're essentially asking, how do you differentiate between these two domains of causality?
Well, and I would argue that intelligent cause is a subsect of material cause.
Well, okay, well, we have to be speaking the same language. So when I say material cause, I'm just saying a cause that does not necessitate an intelligence or a mind.
Same thing here. Nothing about what we do necessitates. Nothing that constitutes our being requires a mind or intelligence. There's a series of biochemical reactions that are holistically creating an effect. and it happens to be we are the thing that are self-aware of it.
Okay, so you don't think that we can differentiate between an intelligent cause or a natural cause? Because there's
Well,
essentially no difference.
Well, wait.
I mean, I think we're a form. I think we're a form of natural cause. I think we can distinguish, like, oh, was this thing made intelligently, or was this thing formed by nature? I think we can differentiate them, but I don't think we can do that with our own origin.
You don't think we can do that for our origin?
Yeah, for the origin of mankind, the origin of life.
Well, I think we're on the same page except for that last part. But Jade,
Well,
did you have something you were going to say?
I would like to know exactly the definition of intelligence and how intelligence is somehow separate from from material.
Well, I'm not even sure I would say it would be separate per se. I've often said that if there is an intelligent cause out there, I believe that it is made of parts. Whatever those parts are, I have absolutely no idea. So you can look at it as a subset of material cause or a natural cause or something like that. But I would say it's, I mean, that's the question. Can all of the effects we observe be explained without that particular subset of cause, of natural cause? Or does it necessitate that particular subset? If you want to think about it as a subset.
I mean, the issue is that you're trying to use retrocausality. I mean, I can say a system will produce certain results as long as I know its parameters. With retrocausality, I run into the issue of probability. There's a probability that if I flip a die, for instance, it may roll 1 as opposed to 3 or as opposed to 6. Right?
Well, I think that.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I'm having a hard time. I guess I'm still trying to figure out where brain is coming from. Because we understand intelligence because we have intelligence. So we understand that intelligence comes from a product of our mind. Animals can produce, or at least we can observe some animals doing intelligent things. But when it comes to systems, when it comes to natural systems, so the best analogy I can give, at least this might not even be a good analogy, but let's say an automation center to build things, to create certain things. So one could argue, yeah, it took intelligence to create, let's say, this automated center. But is there intelligence in what the automation system does? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's one question. Are machines conscious? I don't really think that they are. I think it's kind of... we're also kind of assuming that mind is purely a materialistic thing. I'm not really sure that question's been settled. But,
well, even if it hasn't, I mean, consider the following, right? If you're going to invoke some kind of substance dualism to say that, for instance, there is a part of the mind that's non-physical, yet it is responsible for some function pertaining to minds, the issue becomes, first and foremost, of, number one, so we understand that there's a function that pertains to this metaphysical thing, but number two is, how does this metaphysical object communicate or interact with a physical object to produce a physical effect? Right?
okay.
There seems to be a hole missing there. There seems to be, at some point, where the metaphysical becomes physical, but then reverts back to being metaphysical.
Well, I don't really see why they can't interact. I think the line is kind of artificial a little bit. I mean, it could just be that we just don't... There are things that we don't understand about it. But.
Like, it's kind of like if I tell a child, like, or if a child tells me, like, oh, my nephew tells me, oh, there's a monster under my bed. Well, there isn't, but the monster is, collectively, it's a set of fears that child has, and it's being, in the child's mind, it's materialized. It doesn't exist, but it's more of it's a marker, so to speak. even though it has no physical existence. It does have value, though. So, I mean, I think in some
okay.
sense, like if you're saying, oh, there is this metaphysical thing, it probably is something that exists, but we haven't identified yet. It pertains to human ignorance.
I mean, sure. I didn't want to get into a conversation about mind and whether, you know, the nature of mind, whether it's purely physical or you know, substance dualism or whatever. But I mean, I'm really just I kind of want to get back to the just in principle of the design argument, though. Like, don't you think? Maybe we can all just assume that we all accepted some kind of a design argument. Now, if you were to take a pro-design position, wouldn't you prefer to take the position that allows you to make a positive inference rather than like a fine-tuning argument where you're more like the puddle, thinking that the hole in the ground was made for you? I mean, don't you think, like, looking at DNA and saying, oh, that's digital information, maybe you don't actually agree with that, but let's say if you had to pick one, wouldn't you pick that over fine-tuning?
Why would you have to pick one?
I'm just saying for the sake of argument, like, I mean, don't you think that that's better or less bad than a fine-tuning argument?
Well, it's kind of presenting a little bit of a false dichotomy because it's basically you're narrowing into two choices when you could just say, I don't know. We don't know yet.
No, you definitely can say that, and you can actually draw an inference and still say that too, I think. But I mean, don't you think it's a better argument to say, I see a pattern and I know a cause for that pattern, so I'm going to infer the known cause for that pattern? Don't you think that's a better argument in principle?
Well, it depends on if you're going to define it based on a pattern, you're basing it on stuff that you already. Okay, so if you see design, we see design, we interpret design based on the fact that we've designed things. So that's how we come to the inference for the inference for design. But and we understand that we come to things being intelligently designed because we think that we know that we have intelligence and we've used our intelligence to design things. But when it comes to the origins of everything, or just the intelligent design argument, you don't have anything to infer from.
Well, I mean, that's kind of a separate argument, though. I mean, the question of whether the argument in principle makes more sense than, say, a fine-tuning argument, that's separate from the question of, okay, but are these patterns actually real? Is intelligent cause actually the best explanation for them? Those are separate questions. I think in principle, though, you have a much better structured argument than say the theistic evolutionist who pushes it back to the origin of the cosmos.
And I think if you say there's a pattern, that the presupposition kind of makes itself obvious that there is indeed, or at least it's asserted that there is something that has created these patterns, that has created this system of intricacies. And that's something you can't deny, because if you do, right? Like if I say, oh, it's, it may be possible for this thing not to exist. Well, the notion of the ability to say, oh, well, these things, are designed, they are the derivative of the designer, it falls apart. You're only left with abductive and inference, which is kind of where we're stuck.
Okay, so if you observe a pattern,
because hold on, this still doesn't actually get us to how intelligent design is even better than the theory of evolution, because the theory of evolution and intelligent design are not the same.
Well, that's really windy, Jay.
Yeah, sorry. I'm out on the bay. So.
Yeah. I don't think we even need to go there. I think that's an interesting question. why is intelligent design a better explanation than evolution, or abiogenesis, or whatever. But the problem for me is theistic evolution, or theistic methodological naturalism, for lack of a better term, where it's different design inferences competing with each other. And it seems like a theistic evolutionist, which I'm just going to use that term because it's easier, a theistic evolutionist is very well accepted in a community of people who are atheists or agnostics, who really pride themselves on being rational people, and yet for some reason they're more accepting of somebody who, in my opinion, is basing their conclusion of God on less rational arguments. So it's just very peculiar to me why theistic evolutionists are so much better accepted into the atheist or agnostic community than, like, for example, myself, who I think has better arguments for the conclusion of an intelligent cause.
Okay, so what is your argument for an intelligent design or intelligent design?
Well, I mean, I think, now, keep in mind, the point isn't whether you agree with this argument. The point is whether you think this argument is better or worse than a fine-tuning argument, or any of the arguments that a theistic evolutionist would use. So my argument would be that we can see patterns in biology that we know in our experience comes about from an intelligent cause. Anywhere where we know the cause, it's an intelligent cause. For digital information systems like DNA, for example.
We call it if you're using the idea of using digital to describe DNA, before digital was known, you couldn't have used that word to describe evolution or DNA.
Well, I think that you can use digital. I think it's literally digital. But regardless of whether you agree with the argument or whatever, I'm identifying a very clearly defined pattern, and from that pattern I'm inferring design. So how is that a worse argument?
So how is the theory of evolution not a pattern that we see that we're trying to explain based on our natural observations of things, contradictory to intelligent design?
Contradictory?
Because there's a competition between this. Sometimes people prefer intelligent design over the theory of, or at least what the theory of evolution is is the best explanation for. Intelligent design is trying to say what we see in nature looks like it's been intelligently designed. So therefore, one could conclude this must have had an intelligent design. But the theory of evolution is best describing the diversity of life. So it could be a system separate, or it could be a system that was designed by that intelligent designer.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's true. And there are a lot of design theorists who do accept common descent and many tenets of evolutionary theory. Michael Behe is one of the founders of the intelligent design movement, and he accepts common descent. So I think you're right that they're not incompatible. But I think there are other design proponents who argue that the theory of evolution is incomplete, and maybe from some patterns we observe, some peculiar patterns we observe in the fossil record, maybe a design offers a little explanatory resource in some of those areas, and maybe the type of evolution that we observe on a small scale, maybe it can't be extrapolated quite so far as we think it can.
I mean,
it may not be, but that still doesn't.
I think in a way that that's kind of okay. I think in a way that that's kind of undermines the strength of the theory. The strength of the theory is the notion of a scientific theory is not to be completely uniform in what it describes. It's to be robust enough to describe a set of general, circumstances, a set of general predictions that we expect. It's easy to find exceptions to physical laws, or to find exceptions to things There's always an exception to the rule, so to speak. Those aren't easy to find. What's harder, though, is saying, here's a general phenomenon, and here's something that we can extract to predict the vast majority of them, which is what the theory of evolution manages to do. And usually the reason...
Well, I don't really know if I agree that that's entirely true about evolution. I think there are some interesting arguments, like, for example, the pattern of disparity first in the fossil record, where disparate body plans appear first and then subsequently diversify. That's exactly opposite of what Darwin predicted. I mean, I will grant you, life began as simpler. I'm not sure I would say simple, but it began simpler, and then, you know, the number of life forms grew and the complexity grew. Sure, but when new life forms appeared, they appeared already disparate from each other, and then within those groups they diversified, and that's opposite of what Darwin predicted, and I would say even what evolutionary theory today predicts.
By disparate, you mean?
Totally separate. Like, Darwin's idea was that you have an organism, it gradually diversifies and diversifies, and you have increasing variation until you have completely separate, distinct life forms, like a fish versus a, you know, rabbit. Probably a bad example, but...
Okay, I mean, where do you contrive the notion of gradualism? Right? I mean, there's certain evolutionists that would say that's not, like, that may be the original intent of theory of evolution, but that certainly is not how it tends to function. I mean, gene duplications or translocation events can cause drastic changes within the body plan of an organism or within features we observe.
Well, sure, but I mean, the fact that a theory can always just change and modify, you know, even when the prediction is exactly opposite of what we observe in reality, that's not a strength of the theory. That's kind of, I mean, Thomas Kuhn recognized that as a weakness, sorta. I mean, kind of. I mean,
then that just leaves more to be found out.
I mean, he argued that makes it an unfalsifiable theory, and I mean, at the very least, Popper.
If a weakness can be found in a theory, in a scientific theory, then that's a possibility for falsifiability. So it's not making it unfalsifiable.
There's two ways to go about, you know, the falsification within a theory, and that is, number one, the theory itself is incorrect, or the second, the theory is incomplete, and the reason for this is that one of the presuppositions made, one of the observations that's made, and the hypothesis concerning it and its causality is incorrect. There seeks to be more about the system that previously we let on.
Yeah, I know, but if those are your two options, then it's not falsifiable.
I mean,
and the key point...
Right? I mean,
well, not if that's one of the options, though.
Well, sure.
But the key...
I disagree, because we have older versions of theories that have been falsified, and they're replaced by more modern versions that account for the failure of the first.
Okay, well, I guess the larger paradigm maybe is harder to falsify. But the point, though, that I didn't get to yet is in that particular example where you have new forms appear suddenly and then they subsequently diversify. That's exactly the pattern that we see on a large scale with an intelligent cause. I mean, look at the history of automobiles. You see disparate forms appear, motorcycles, the Model T. These are disparate forms, the tank, and then they subsequently diversify. So you have a positive pattern there. And I think these are interesting arguments. And you can't just, I don't think you can just write them off. But I mean, I think that these are much stronger arguments, yet they receive much less respect than the arguments a theistic evolutionist might get for their arguments, for for an intelligent cause. So that's the perplexing thing. I think these are much stronger arguments. And you tell me if it's a stronger or weaker argument than the fine-tuning argument.
I would say it's weaker.
Why is it weaker? It's a positive inference.
I would say that so is
Wait, hold on.
Right? I mean,
What
it
does it being
seems
positive make it true?
Say that again. I didn't quite hear you.
I don't. Nah, never mind. Go ahead, Daniel. Sorry.
and I think in this, like the fine tuning is also a positive inference. It's saying, look, like in this particular organism and from this parent organism, we noticed that there were issues faced by this organism that were set upon by these particular genes. And now what we notice is that the progeny, the offspring of the parents, no longer have this issue. So there appears to be a proper tuning mechanism, so to speak, of these genes that causes, better adaptability for this organism or for the progeny.
But it's not an argument that distinguishes between an intelligent cause or a natural cause.
I think they would probably say that an intelligent cause is responsible for it.
Yeah, but how do you get to that conclusion from that argument, though? You have to differentiate, and I don't see how that argument differentiates.
I think probably some would probably say the impossibility of the contrary. That by the time you ran through all the other options, the organism would be dead.
Are you talking about evolution?
Well, evolution and just general adaptation of progeny.
So you're talking about biological evolution and the fact that it's impossible allows you to infer design?
I would say that I think somebody who is arguing from a fine-tuning perspective may say that it seems far too unlikely for a system randomly to generate these proportions that allow this system to survive.
Right. Well, when I say fine-tuning, I'm referring to like the parameters of the universe. Like people will say that the universe is fine-tuned to allow life to occur, and if it was a little bit different in any one of these parameters, then life could never occur within the universe. So
right.
That's
kind of a particular variance. But
you would disagree that that's a good argument?
Yeah, I don't think it's.
Okay.
I don't think it can really be substantiated because number one, even if it's true, we don't have other universes to really view and see if that supposition is true or not. It could be the case that there's an infinitum of universes that exist that we're not aware of, and that they all are capable of supporting life. And that would, in essence, rebuke the need for. I forget the name of it now. For the need of fine tuning.
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, if there's a infinite multiverse, then probability kind of comes to save the day there.
Yeah.
So I think it's a bad argument for that reason. I also think it's a bad argument because there's no positive pattern that you can say is exclusive to an intelligent cause. Because we're talking about things that are totally alien. Like, in my arguments, you can identify specific patterns. Now, agree or disagree that nature can't create those same patterns. At least I'm identifying patterns that are known to be produced by an intelligent cause. When it comes to the universe, the fine-tuning of the universe, what are we comparing the parameters of the universe to? What intelligent activity that we are directly familiar with are we comparing the universe to? I think that's necessary in order to derive an inference to an intelligent cause. I don't see how you're getting there.
And I would say that, like, some natural causes could be mistaken for intelligent causes. For instance, there's several organisms have very odd patterns that relate themselves to, like, the Fibonacci numbers, for instance, in the Fibonacci sequence. which some people may say, okay, that's kind of interesting. That's, oh, that's God's fingerprint. That's God's, musical keyboard. Or some people would say, I don't know. Maybe that's just, maybe that's just how nature decided to build its system.
Yeah, well, I mean, you kind of at a stalemate there, I mean, but you have to have, in order to get to the design inference, it has to be a positive argument. And I don't see how you get to the positive argument without knowledge about where a pattern comes from. And it just seems like the argument is just like, well, there are these parameters that independently come together to create a universe like ours. And it's interesting. But is it a positive inference? I don't think it is. And therefore, I don't see how you can say that that's a better argument than the argument from information or whatever, where at least it's a positive inference. You might think it's a bad argument, but at least it gets to being a positive inference.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, I guess, like, my issue is fundamentally that there's a failure to distinguish between whether something is the appearance of design and something actually being designed or not. Like, it seems that there's an inability to differentiate between one from the other. And that Occam's razor kind of selects the one that takes the fewest assumptions.
Sure. I have no problem with that.
Which is why people would say, even if there is an intelligent designer, the fact that we can't necessarily differentiate one and the fact that the intelligent designer presupposes more makes it unlikely. It causes it to be unfavorable as a solution.
Well, okay, but so now we're talking about the competition between intelligent cause versus material cause, which I'm fine with. But I mean, are there arguments that the theistic evolutionist has that are good or better than my arguments, than the information argument, where you actually identify a pattern? I mean, do they have any argument that even makes a positive inference?
But again, this is not evolution. Is not positing a creation event.
I know that.
I mean, they have the same arguments. Plus, they can reference phylogenetic trees, theistic. Let's see. What's it? Like microbiotic paleontology. There's all sorts of things we can reference if we wanted to say, hey, look, there is the consistency for this design, for this.
You mean within evolution or within biological systems? You're saying that evolutionary theory itself can be co-opted as an argument to design? I do not hear you, Immutable. I don't know if you're trying to talk or what, but...
Yeah, I can't hear him either.
Oh. Yeah. Well, yeah, Jay, and I'm not intentionally zeroing in on evolution per se. I'm just using that as shorthand to cover material cause, whether it's biochemistry or just laws of physics.
Because you've made that reference before about an intelligent cause and a material cause.
Mm-hmm.
But every example that we have of producing anything using intelligence to make something material is you know what I'm saying? It comes from our own material.
It comes from our own what?
Okay, our intelligence comes from us, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we use our intelligence to make something, to design something. That's material making material.
Yeah, but it's material with the property of a mind. producing something else that's material, that may or may not have the property of mind.
Okay, but even ants can make stuff. Do they have mind?
I mean, I think there is an argument that they have some kind of proto-consciousness.
Okay, so, but most of the time when we see some kind of something being created, it's being created by something that has some kind of a consciousness, some kind of ability to create or to design, right?
You're asking if the ability to create is my definition of intelligence?
Yeah.
No, I think it's just self-awareness, the ability to have subjective experience.
Okay, but when we make, how is it that we're able to make that?
I don't know how we're able to do that. I mean, you can make some arguments that it's an emergent property of the brain, or an emergent effect that the brain produces. We definitely don't understand how it's produced.
But in order for us to make something, we think about it, right? We think about what it is that we're making.
Sure.
Yeah, so one could say that that is our intelligence being used to develop something or to design something.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So do we have any examples of anything that could make stuff with, that could create universes? Do we have any examples of anything that's an intelligent being that can create universes or create life from nothing? Do we have any examples of that?
Well, life is a really big word. I would break it down to specific patterns that we observe within life, and those specific patterns you can say that intelligent cause produces that. Now, as far as the universe, that's kind of my problem. I don't think we can say that, and that's why.
We know life exists inside the universe.
Sure.
Okay, so it doesn't really, without getting into the pedantics of what life is or what life isn't.
Sure.
Or the origin of life, something creating life, something designing the universe, everything that we've, at least that, as far as we know of. Do we have any examples of anything being able to do that on that scale? Now everybody's muted.
The answer.
I'm not muted. Hi, everybody.
Hey, Peter.
I'm just playing catch up. So.
Oh.
I'm gonna have to go in a couple of minutes, guys. But I'll let you guys keep going if you want to. You can discuss among yourselves. But I guess what I'm really looking for is an explanation for why the theistic evolutionist, by which I really mean theistic methodological naturalist, is so much better accepted, even though I feel like their views, their conclusion of theism or intelligent cause is less rational, because they discard what I think are the strongest arguments for intelligent cause. So that's the part I'm still confused about, is, why is that? I guess it has to be because the commonality is evolution or abiogenesis. That, I think, has to be the commonality that they have with the atheist position or the agnostic position. I mean, that's got to be it. I mean, because it can't be because they are thought to be... But it can't be because their conclusion of God is thought to be more rational than, say, my conclusion of God or intelligent cause. Because I think it clearly is not as rational. I think it clearly has poorer arguments and clearly discards the better arguments.
Okay, but methodological naturalism is just you're looking at how things work in nature. That's not necessarily formulating a cause.
Well, but methodological naturalism means that when you're trying to explain something, you don't consider intelligent cause, essentially.
Well, you can't. Well, no. You look at the evidence that you're being presented.
Say that one more
And then
time.
you look at the evidence that you're being presented. If you just
I don't think
automatically
that's.
if you automatically infer that everything comes from an intelligent designer, then you really don't need an answer for anything. You can just look at anything and say, "Yep, that came from an intelligent designer. That's all I need to accept about that."
Oh yeah, and
So
that's why.
the methodological natural process is going to figure out why nature does what it does, or why these processes occur.
Yeah, but that's why I don't argue for intelligent cause that way. I don't say that everything necessarily was created by intelligent cause. But methodological naturalism does say that we can only infer natural cause. Science can only study natural cause. That's what methodological naturalism is.
Well, until such a time science can look at other possible things outside of nature.
I don't. That's not what methodological naturalism is.
No,
No,
because
no, no.
If you can do that, then it becomes methodological naturalism.
Yeah.
If you take the supernatural and then you can identify it and test it, and then it becomes natural.
Right. So these aren't
supernatural.
So then we come down to the point that categories of supernatural and natural aren't actual things. They're not actual properties of things. It just pertains to what we know about these things. So then methodological naturalism essentially is meaningless.
We can't make that determination between natural and supernatural. We have nothing to determine.
Right.
Determination of what supernatural is.
Right, so methodological naturalism essentially is meaningless because now we are acknowledging that science can study whether or not there is an intelligent cause.
It only becomes useless when studying the supernatural.
Right, but that doesn't mean anything. Because you just said...
the supernatural doesn't mean anything because it doesn't exist.
No, but you just said if there was something supernatural and we suddenly were able to observe it and measure it and...
Yeah, it becomes a natural cause. Yeah.
But it doesn't become natural. What changes is our knowledge. Nothing about the thing changes. It's our knowledge that changes. So it's not a real category of things. It's a category of our knowledge.
Yeah, but think about this. Think about it. A long time ago, man used to actually come up with concepts for where lightning came from. It had no natural explanatory properties. So they said it came from supernatural causation. Once we were able to figure out that lightning was actually not coming from gods, but it's an actual natural occurrence, it was no longer supernatural. It was natural because now we can measure it. We can quantify.
Yeah, but I don't really think that's what Peter was saying. I mean, a flying unicorn and it's kind of a supernatural thing, or Tinkerbell's supernatural thing, or whatever. Now,
you don't know that.
if we actually observed it though, we wouldn't think of it as supernatural. We'd think of it as this crazy natural thing that we had to figure out. It's not a category of things.
So really,
it's a category of knowledge.
When you're talking about intelligent design, what we're really talking about is the gaps of where it can fit. Like, I don't think we have from after the Big Bang up into the chemistry of life on Earth. I don't think there's any dispute. It's really easy. The facts are very clear. From going backwards, from life that it is today, we can easily go backwards to the point where first life existed. And the only gap I see is the bridge between chemistry and life, which is abiogenesis. That's the only gap that I can see the supernatural being coming into play. Like that's the gap that that it would fit in.
Yeah,
I don't think there's any other gaps unless you can. You might say the Big Bang is a gap because.
I mean, the better explanation always fills in the gaps of the poorer explanation.
Okay, but where is the gap for intelligent designer?
Well, I mean, I think there are well-defined effects that you can say, we know intelligent cause produces these things, but we don't know that natural cause produces these things. Now, agree with that or disagree, I have to, again, say, it's a stronger argument than what the theistic evolutionist has.
But you don't know that
but there is no argument.
Exists outside. How did you come to the idea that there's an intelligence outside the material?
Well, that's a semantic question again. What are we saying is material? Are we saying everything that exists is material?
No,
We can even describe an intelligent cause as a subset of material. I'm perfectly comfortable with that. I'm merely saying that that the property of having a mind is necessary for certain effects.
but we don't know of a mind being able to do what intelligent design is actually positing, and that is that there is some kind of an intelligent designer or designers that created everything that we experience now.
Yeah, but science isn't only limited to 100% familiar causes. We can posit unfamiliar causes, causes that have. Yeah, we can rationally posit it from known effects. I mean,
hold on. How is it rational to posit something that intelligence caused everything, or created everything?
but I didn't say
You
that.
have nothing to infer from. You have no examples to go from.
Well, I think I do have examples. I'm trying to point out
Do you
that
have examples?
the
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. But do you have any examples that you're not getting from a natural point of view?
that nature doesn't explain.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean DNA. The whole information system of DNA is my go-to example. That's my favorite one because I think it's the best defined.
That there's an intelligent designer behind the creation of DNA. How did you?
Yeah.
How,
Because it's a digital information system. You have discrete signal components that are converted by an intermediary translation apparatus into disparate physical states.
okay, but
That is a digital information system, and it's
But
an
again,
extremely concrete definition.
but you're inferring from a material example,
Mhm.
and that so we as intelligent beings came up with digital information, right?
Right, we produce that effect
Yeah. So
with the use of
now,
mind.
But now what you have to do is you have to go back and say that there's something that's greater than us that produced that programmed DNA as a digital coding system.
Yeah, well, I don't know what you mean by greater, quote unquote, but I can say
Okay,
that the effect exists. We observe the effect, and the only other place where we've seen that effect is where intelligent causes produced it.
Okay, but how do we come to the conclusion that that was actually produced by an intelligent being?
Because we know intelligent cause can produce that effect, we don't know that natural cause can produce that effect. We haven't observed nature produce that. We've observed the system self-replicate, but that's different from the origin of it.
So what you're doing is you're taking science and the terminology that we're using to describe different processes and different computational things like circuits and things like that. You're applying those terms to DNA. That doesn't make sense.
I'm not misusing or using any of the terms. I'm describing the system as it exists.
You're describing the system as you would describe something that's different than what life is and what DNA is.
There are differences, sure, but we can make inferences from the similarities. We can make inferences. We can make inferences based on the fact that these things fit the same concrete definition. It is a pattern. It is the same pattern.
I will get back to you on that one because I have a really good counter argument for that, but I need to do a little more research before I give that to you.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. I look forward to it too.
Yeah, Peter, you're a good guy. You're a good guy, Peter.
You know, I don't like to talk about bullshit. If I say something, I'll back up.
Then why are you here talking to me? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, because I don't know, because
I'm just joking.
Well, no, I have an answer to that.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm educated, I'm scientific, I'm done raising kids and everything else, so I'm a little bit bored. And why not share my knowledge and intellect and scientific background with people who are a little more, a little less experienced in those things than I am.
Yeah.
So how
hey,
about
why
that?
not? Yeah.
Yeah, why not?
I think that's great.
Spreading knowledge is fun, and talking about things is fun and challenging. So I love learning and I love reading, and it challenges me. It gives me something to learn and read and study and to argue against.
Yep. All right. Well, guys, I have to go. I feel like we were just kind of getting into it here, but unfortunately, I've got to work tomorrow, and I've got kids and everything, and they're waking up. So, but I'm trying to do this every Tuesday until my school starts back up, and maybe, depending on how that goes, continuing it after school starts. So look for it next Tuesday. I haven't decided on the topic yet. If you guys have any ideas, let me know, and maybe we'll talk about it. But thanks for...
I have a very important topic.
Okay.
Do it on a day other than Tuesday.
Oh, yeah, sorry. See, the thing is, Tuesday is the day after all my assignments are due, once I'm in school.
Okay. All right, well,
But
Tuesday
anyways.
is my grandson's field hockey, so...
Oh, gotcha. Well, we'll have to work something out. Maybe Thursday or Friday this week. Anyways, I'm going to go. Did you guys want to hang out and discuss? Because I'll leave it running.
But I'm open if Peter's got something going on.
Well, actually, my wife just brought me my food, so...
Oh,
Okay.
that's very important.
It's my last solid meal before my colonoscopy
Oh,
Thursday.
okay. On that note. All right. Well, you guys were a lot of fun. I appreciate that.
Yep.
So, let me see here. Jay, I'm going to add you, and I think I'm going to add you to my distribution list for next time.
Okay.
All right. Appreciate it, guys. I'll see you next time.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Yeah,
Bye.
glad to be here too. Okay,
Good
bye.
to see you, Peter.
Yep, I'm looking forward to it, man.
Yeah. All right. Bye.
Bye.